Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Your Project Shepherd Construction podcast. My name is Curtis Lawson with Shepherd Construction Advisors, and along with my industry expert friends, I am here to guide you through these 4 key components of a successful project, which are demonstrated by this simple drawing of a house. The foundation is proper planning. The left wall is your team, the right wall is communication, and the roof is proper execution. Have all 4 of these components in place and your project will succeed. Whether you're building or remodeling a custom home, or if you're an architect or designer looking for inspiration, or maybe you're just interested in building science and high-performance construction, you're in the right place. Please help us further our mission here by tapping that follow or subscribe button, push that notification bell so that you know when our new episodes drop every week. And now, let's get to today's interview. Hey friends, welcome back to the Your Project Shepherd podcast. I'm your host, Curtis Lawson, and joining me today is my friend Stephanie Finch. Stephanie's with Finch Properties Group, which is, I think, a part of Compass Real Estate now. Is that right?
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being here. We met a few years ago through one of my former employees and a good friend of mine, Marla Sanders, who's also a friend of yours, who you know through a mutual childhood friend, right?
That's right.
And so we met just talking about construction and real estate. And, you know, I have a background in real estate too. I have a broker's license, which I don't really do much with anymore. But I always love kind of talking real estate shop a little bit too. So tell us about you and your history, you know, how you got into real estate brokerage and kind of what your story is.
Sure. So I actually started, I got my real estate license in college.
Wow.
So yeah, I got it right away. It was my first and only career. I was going to school at UT and I was living in Austin and I wanted a part-time job and I wanted just a few hours and I looked on a Longhorn job board and it was for an assistant. It didn't say real estate assistant. It was just assistant. It was just a few hours a week. I'm like, that's perfect. And she happened to be a realtor. And her daughters were my age and they were also in college and they were getting their license. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe I can use it. And she owned a brokerage that she had sold. So she wasn't training agents. She didn't have agents, but I was like, I really want to do this. She said, we can do it, but I'm not going to train you. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. So I got licensed and I started leasing to my friends and I literally brought her a check and she was like, oh, okay, we're gonna have to take some of that. So that's how I got started early on. And then it just kind of grew from there.
How long have you had your own company?
I started Finch Properties in 2014 and that was my own brokerage and I had my own storefront and all of it. And it was a lot of spinning plates for me. Mm-hmm. So I had been selling and I love selling and I was like, I'm going to go on my own. I think that happens and you're like, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I can, but again, it's a lot to own your own. So I started the team at the same time and we ended up going with Compass about 4 years ago just to simplify things.
Mm-hmm. Having that back office support as a broker is huge. And, you know, the kind of that network of being a part of the larger company also brings you leads and lots of other benefits, marketing and for me, I was selling and I love selling and I'm client facing. And so to have clients and manage the team, that was plenty. And that's the best, you know, what we're the best at. The rest of it being handled by Compass was really helpful actually to keep us in a good spot. A few weeks, maybe months, I don't remember. It was a while back. You posted something on Facebook and I saw the post that you put up and it said something like, we've got a guy for everything. And you talked about how in this current HGTV driven world where everybody sees all this cool stuff all the time, people seem to be updating their houses more often, doing more remodeling and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And so many of your clients, when you're either their listing broker, they're selling their house, they need something fixed before they close, or when they buy a house, they need to have something done, right? Mm-hmm. You've kind of created this network of good referrals to use. I had this idea that came to my head. I'm like, you know, this is a little bit off topic from what we usually talk about here, because we're talking about, you know, how to build a house the right way or common construction failures and things like that. But I started thinking about kind of what the tie-in could be for, you know, having that personal network but as a consumer, you know, working with good professionals who have a good network, right?
Right.
Because good good people attract good people, right?
Yeah. And there's a huge layer of accountability there, right? So if I'm recommending, I learned that early on, you recommend someone you don't know that well, but you just heard someone's name, those tend to go very badly. And that always comes back to you. Or if they don't say anything to you and it went badly, it's just something you didn't even know went badly. So recommending the right people where there's some accountability there and you can follow up and the response is going to be good is huge, right? It keeps them coming back and sharing our name as well.
Yeah.
For all kinds of stuff.
I mean, everyone, and not everyone, but most people have some kind of personal network. Most realtors that I know have people that they refer, but I've seen both sides of this spectrum. I've worked with realtors who have really great network of individuals they refer to, and then I've worked with people who have they're driven more by the low cost. Like they feel the need just to refer people to cheap people just because they want to help their clients save a buck, which is fine. Like it's important to help people get a good deal, but at the same time, I've experienced, just call this guy, he can do it cheaper, right?
Yeah,
and that's not really a great approach.
Right. You want quality and long-term results for the project. People call us for all kinds of scales of project too. That's a big thing. It's like they want to know who can do a bathroom, and so we'll go a little deeper. A past client, I'm like, well, what do you want to do to that bathroom? Do you want to move plumbing around, or do you just want to do the countertops? And just really diving into their project to make sure they get the right fit, to make sure it goes well.
Yeah, because a company like ours is not going to be a great fit for if you just want to put a coat of paint on it and change some light bulbs or whatever. Like, I mean, we can do it, but we're way too expensive for that, right?
Yeah.
And so, those are the situations where you need to have a reliable guy who can come out and knock that stuff out quickly.
Yeah.
But then also knowing when's the right time to call a company that does design and gut that bathroom or the whole house or whatever, right? So.
Yeah, and finishes. I find that people take that on thinking that that's their only option, is to just pick and choose, to open up their computer and pick and choose what they think they want, and they've never experienced the value of a designer. So just bringing that to their life, that it doesn't have to be so expensive, and that it really is life-changing and they don't have to make all those decisions, is also big. So the designer piece has been fun too, just to introduce that to so many people. So many of our clients are moving from their second or maybe even first home into a home that's going to be longer term. And it's the first time they've had to go through that, and they don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Making that bad decision there is going to cost them a lot of money, but also a lot of time. Like if they're in a time crunch to get moved into a house in a certain amount of time before they close on another property and they have to be in the house, you choose the wrong guy who takes the check and disappears for a couple weeks before he does anything. Now your whole timeline's been destroyed. I think that kind of the theme here is that good people, good professionals have good networks.
Absolutely.
But it's also choosing like the right person who's appropriate for the price range that you're operating into. And so this goes both ways. So like if speaking for somebody or to somebody who is trying to choose a realtor, for example, you may be tempted to use your cousin, your brother, your neighbor who sells houses out in the suburbs, but you're looking for a house in close in the town. So they're used to selling $150,000 properties, if those still exist, out in the suburbs. But you're looking for a $2 million house close to downtown. Can they do it?
Maybe. I have a really interesting story for you that goes along those lines. I'm selling a house right now. So we get called in to sell, right? Because if we're in that area, so we're primarily in town, Heights or Memorial. And so we get called in to sell a house. So we're selling a house right now, and they bought it just 2 years ago. And it is a 3-story townhome. It's beautiful. It's $1 million townhome, and it's all stucco. And they did not get a stucco inspection whenever they bought the house. And so we went under contract. It's a great place. And the stucco people came out, and every single side of the house needs work. And this is like a $50,000 project that she had no idea was coming.
And so when they bought the house, their realtor that they were working with maybe wasn't familiar with those types of properties and just didn't think or didn't know that you should get that,
they just
right?
Most likely didn't even know about it, because that's what, the owner's telling me, like, I had no idea, no clue. No one told me that this is even like a inspection that's done.
Yeah. But it's like a common thing. Hey, in these townhouses in this part of town,
Happens all the time.
these are like typical problems that arise, and so your experience or your competency in working in that area is what allows you to, or, to recommend that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Heights Historic District, that's another one. We work in that area pretty often, and people wanting to remodel in a historic district, it's a huge undertaking, and it's a big, it affects pricing and all kinds of things.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, we see people that buy a house in the historic district that maybe don't know what all that entails, and then they end up buying this property that they can't do what they thought they could do with it, and now they're stuck with a property that maybe it's hard to resell for some reason because there's some issue that no one else wanted to buy it because you can't do a certain thing to it. So
that's exactly right. Or just even that a project like that takes 2 years. I mean, you guys know, you guys are on the build side, but holding costs on a $500,000 property for 2 years is something to consider that people don't always know is coming if they want to remodel a property like that. So,
yeah, I mean, that's what, I don't know, between the taxes and taxes, insurance, and mortgage payments, they might drop another $50,000 or more,
easily.
or more just in holding costs over that time. So that might not be in their budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, using somebody who operates in the right area that you want to be in is really important. In fact, we were talking about this before we started recording. That's actually like one of the things that you learn in real estate school, or that you're supposed to learn and remember is that you should be competent in the market that you're operating in. Right. That's
absolutely
like a lot of agents and brokers get sued over taking on something they shouldn't have. So that's another great reason to use somebody who's in the area that you want to be in.
In the area, and then also in the specialty. I mean, commercial is different than residential, and multifamily and all of that.
All right, so let's back up a little bit and go back to something that we mentioned early on, and that's how it seems like today people are doing more remodeling projects, remodeling more often. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Yes, absolutely. I think whenever I started in real estate, we used to tell buyers like every 10 years is updated, within the past decade. And sellers, even at the time, were surprised by that. They're like, 10 years, I just did this. And now today it's every 5, right? Thank you, HGTV and all the shows and, every Pinterest. Everyone wants everything updated. 5 years is not long at all. So sellers are shocked to hear that. Some of them, we're telling them countertops that they did 8 years ago are completely outdated and nobody wants them.
Yeah, I mean, we actually just had an older couple in the office this morning to talk about remodeling their bathroom. And the husband was like, I don't know why we're doing this again. We just did this 20 years ago.
Exactly. To a seller or someone who's lived there, they don't think that way at all. But then for the timeline to be decreased from 10 to 5 years is shocking to people who have been in a house 8 or 9 years thinking hasn't been that long.
Yeah. I think also that the prices surprise a lot of people who haven't done it in 10 or 20 years too, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's see, I've been in business for 20 years. And when I started, you could easily do a bathroom remodel for $10,000 or $15,000. And now that same bathroom, in fact, the couple that was in here, we're talking about $50,000 for a bathroom that would have been $15,000 20 years ago.
Yes.
And so, that's not a big bathroom either. That's like a typical, 1950s, guest bath.
Yep. And that's not surprising to me, but it is shocking to a lot of people who haven't looked at those numbers or done any projects like that in the past 5-8 years.
Yeah. So I don't know that people are necessarily planning on that. If they're like, if they're going to be in a house for 5 or 10 years, I don't know that they always have that in their mind or in their budget that, or before I sell this house, maybe I should consider doing this.
No, and the sellers, it's not on their radar, but to come to them and teach them that the buyers are expecting it or it might come out in price is a shock for them sometimes.
Yeah. Do you think it's easier to sell something that's already been updated, that's ready to go, versus something that is being discounted and is kind of more of a blank slate? What, you have a take on that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Buyers cannot, they just can't visualize it. So you and I are in the industry. We've seen a lot of things. We have good vision for it, but also just experience, right? And so you kind of know the potential. The buyers do not. So what I have to teach some people wanting to go through this process and willing to update to get a good offer, buyers will pay more for it because they can't see it or understand it. They will overpay, and they're happy to overpay because it's done.
Mm.
And so teaching a seller that, if they're open to it, I'm like, hey, you could spend 40 grand and get 140, right? And it's still time, energy. And some say no. They're like, nope, I don't have the bandwidth for that. I'm good. But some say yes. And so we kind of go through that project with them and teach them, put in a little here to get some back.
They also have to be planning that far enough in advance, because I think a lot of times people aren't talking to you until they're pretty much ready to list now.
Right.
And some of those projects that
and
cost $30,000, $40,000 might take a couple months to do.
Well, yes. And it's not always with selling in mind. I love when clients call me before a big project, period, because we can have a few conversations. I mean, no, they're not trying to sell right that minute, but I can just teach them some of these things if they will just, ask for it. And it works out really, really well. They're very happy, or I can teach them, hey, if you do that, I'm sure it's beautiful. It's not going to add a lot of market value, but you will, live and enjoy it for a long time, and just showing them the difference.
What's your take on how much people should put into a house and how sensitive should they be to over improving or, resale value and things like that? That's something that I hear tossed around a lot, where they're like, well, I don't want to spend that much on my remodel because I'll never get it back. Or, how does that compare to the market value and what I paid for it? So what are your thoughts on that?
I have several thoughts on it. It gets tossed around. Like you said, people are told something and that they don't fully understand. Maybe there is a misconception sometimes that I spent it, so I should get it, period. And that is almost never the case. Over time, a home values can increase. But if truly they're asking me like, hey, if I spend this $80,000 now, is it $80,000 of market value now? I'm like, no. And no one can predict what your house will be exactly 10 years from now. But if you call me in a year and you've spent $250,000, that doesn't mean that it's worth $250,000 more right now.
Right. I think before people spend that money, they need to kind of have in mind how long they plan on being in the house.
Yes.
If it's a 2 to 5 year thing, what's the average right now for like how long people stay in their houses?
Well, this is the other reason. This is wild. The statistics, when I started in the business, it was like 8 years, which was a long, or maybe even 6. And then it went up to 8. Now they're saying it's over 10 because of the climate that's happening. I mean, currently with rates, but really just low inventory, cost of homes, period. People are just staying longer. So many reasons that they're staying longer. So it's going to be over 10 years. So more people will look to remodel versus move because it's harder to move.
But if you're in a situation where you're probably only going to be in that house for a couple of years.
Yes.
Especially here in Houston, we see that a lot, like in the medical center and kind of the in-town with doctors who are here on a rotation for a couple of years and they move on, right?
Yeah.
I think those people especially need to be sensitive to what they put into the house.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I try to tell the ones who ask me like, hey, if 3 years is a minimum for any kind of return in that regard, I wouldn't expect anything. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it for yourself.
Yeah. So which brings me to my next point, and that's you shouldn't do a remodeling project or even a new construction project always with resale in mind. There's a certain percentage of that has to be personal enjoyment, right?
Correct.
I mean, again, when you're selling, there may be some strategy to doing certain things to improve resale value, which is another topic. But if you're going to remodel your kitchen, don't do it just for resale. If you're planning on being there for 10 years, your horizon for, who knows what's going to happen in 10 years? Your horizon for what the house is going to be worth. You're going to be there for a long time, and you want to get the enjoyment out of that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like the old conversation about a pool. People are always asking, well, if I put in a pool, do I ever get that money back? I'm like, well, probably not.
Nope.
But how much do you like being outside and having that space for your kids or your family or whatever? So
yeah. And I've started trying to help people through that because yes, they've heard so many things for so long. And how do you put it in perspective of their life, especially for me when they're dealing with a purchase? And so I will equate it to a car. I'm like, think of a pool like a car. Do you want it? You don't want it? Don't worry about the resale. If you can afford it and you want it, then do it.
Another take that's probably not as popular with realtors, and I can say this because I am one. So I think there are a lot of people that maybe shouldn't even buy a house. If you're only going to be in a place for 1 or 2 years, especially if you look like right now with rates the way they are, but also when you think about the amount of maintenance and then your transactional costs, so your commissions and your closing costs, buying and selling. If you're only going to be there in a city for 2 years, is it really even worth buying a house?
I don't disagree with you. I agree. There's plenty of people who probably shouldn't or should take a 1 year. You're not losing so much in 1 year by making the right decision and taking the time to really figure it out. I agree with that.
I have several realtor friends, and I'm always seeing posts about, pushing people to buy. If you're renting, you should consider buying. And I'm like, I actually see a lot of people put themselves in a bad financial situation because they maybe they stretch to buy the house, but then they don't have the money to really properly maintain it once they have it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those hidden costs, I guess, that when you buy that $500,000 house, it's not you're not just replacing your rent check with a mortgage check.
Right. Oh, there's other expenses.
There's obviously the property taxes is the big one, but it's like,
maintenance,
replacing the air conditioner, whatever. It's all those maintenance costs that people don't take into account. And so then they get 10 years down the road to sell the house and it has all this deferred maintenance on it.
Yeah. Well, and the Real Estate Association puts out all kinds of studies. And I don't remember the percentage, but people who regret buying their first house or looking back saying their very first house was not the right decision. And that is like a very common feeling, that either it wasn't the right time, it was too much house, it wasn't a good investment period. I mean, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Buying just to buy because you feel like it's the next step in your life, not
mm-hmm.
always the right next step.
Yeah. I mean, I think it gets sold as the American dream where you have to, the steps are you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house, and but that's not the right path for everybody. I mean, honestly, like I wish that we had not bought our first house when we did. Like I wish we had kept our rent lower, not had the maintenance costs, and just banked that money for a few more years. Then we could have bought a much better property,
mm-hmm.
Or it had some more liquid cash sitting there to work with.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that that's an easy message to get out there. You got realtors pushing home sales, but I agree with what you're saying.
I'm not sure that all realtors are going to give you that information, but if you're working with a quality person, they're going to give you that feedback.
Yeah.
Same thing for me. Like people come to me and they're stretching, trying to do a remodeling project. Sometimes I try to discourage them. I'm like, if you're trying to beat the budget down $100 to get the job done, that $100 is that important in the grand scheme of things, you probably shouldn't be spending this money to do this project, right?
Yeah. And I spend a lot of time with my clients talking about their plans because in general, it's easier for people making a really big decision when they're buying any house at any stage, to compartmentalize it and say, oh, this is a 10-year plan. And I am always the first to give them the reality of how many people move out of their first or second home within 3 to 4 years, right? And just giving them a frame of reference for that and helping them understand like, hey, this is why it needs to be the right buy now. This is not your forever home, you told me. And if you said 8 years, then that means 4. And, when you call me in 4 years, we want you to be able to sell this thing. So those things are important.
I hear the term forever home thrown about.
Oh my gosh. I hate
all
that
the
term.
time. It's like the buzzword, especially in building a new house.
Oh, I'm sure you
like
hear it
like
a lot,
custom house. People are like, oh, I'm building my forever home. And then five years later, you see the house on the market. You're like, oh. Yeah.
Well, and we sell at every phase and every person talks about their forever home. The first time home buyers who are, let's say they're right at 30 and they're like, I could live here forever. I could live here for 15 years. I'm like, you won't be here 15 years, especially because the cost is going up. If you're in town, they're trying to make this long-term thing. But people who kids are gone, they're buying a house and we talk about that and they're like, well, I need to sell this house we've been in for 15 years. That was their forever home. They have been there 15 years. Their next home, some will say it's their forever home. And I'm like, no, this is probably your 10-year home. But just so you know, from what I've seen, in 10 years, you're going to be tired of this and want something different.
Yeah. It's definitely changed because the couple that I mentioned earlier that was in here that said they remodeled 20 years ago and now they're doing their bathroom again. Like that's a whole different generation. Like they have been in that house. I think they said they bought it shortly after it was built in the 1960s.
Wow.
And they've been in that same house that long, and they have several neighbors who've been in that house that long. So that's something that used to happen a lot more.
Yes.
I think like my parents probably wouldn't have moved the two times that they have since I was around, if they weren't forced to because of a job change, right?
Right.
They're definitely that generation, that mentality of, we buy something and we stay in it. And
Yeah, in town has been interesting because people will build a large house. Like, let's say they build a beautiful brand new house, and the maintenance and taxes, if you don't need the big house anymore, then they want to sell it and they want to downsize to an equally, nice scale, but like on a smaller scale.
mm-hmm.
So that's common. They're like, okay, I don't need a 4,000 square foot house anymore. So then they downsize a little bit, and then, that plays itself out now in these areas. They're so expensive. Like, okay, I did that. I don't need this anymore. This is the plan now. So I see it a lot more, I think.
Yeah. It's funny, we're kind of having that conversation in our house right now because we bought a 1950s ranch house 10 years ago. And, we have 3 kids. The house isn't that big. It's only 2,300 square feet, which people are shocked when they hear me say that. They're like, you build custom houses. Well, yeah, but I don't need to live in that. So I'm in a 2,300 square foot 1950s house. But it was great for our 3 kids. And now that they're starting to go to college, we're looking at each other. We're like, we don't need to move. Like, we don't need to downsize because we never even upsized to begin with.
Exactly. But if the trend, for those who do, then they don't need it anymore. I mean, we did move into a house that is bigger than what we need, and the kids know that's our 14-year house.
Yeah.
So talk about it that way. I'm like, we're going to sell it.
Yeah. So now we're like talking about, adding on maybe like a little guest apartment in the backyard for when, maybe grandkids come one day, or if my parents or her parents need to move in one day and stay there for health issues. So we're looking at that property from that angle now. So
yeah, which I think is great.
So actually, this is totally off topic, but that's a great starter. I've seen a lot more people wanting or being interested in kind of multi-generational living, or at least the potential for that, and having a guest house on the property in the backyard, or a guest apartment older parents can live in.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you're getting more requests for, seeing more on the brokerage end of things?
There's not a lot of it. So yes, people love it. People want it. They have asked about it, and it's kind of hard to get. The land sizes aren't that big, right? So it's kind of hard to do. But when you can make it work, yes, it's very desirable.
Yeah. I know that the city of Houston is actually pushing for more density. Like that they want to be able to allow more building on smaller properties in the city to kind of try to counteract sprawl.
It would be really valuable if a builder could figure that out and really replicate that model in some way. I think it would be valuable, but there's a lot of things to it, right? I mean, aging parents, it's hard to say, yes, a garage apartment would be good, because it really wouldn't, because of the stairs, mm-hmm. right? So finding the land area to put 2 living spaces in that way is kind of difficult.
Yeah, or just planning it to where that space has an elevator or some kind of good access.
Yeah, exactly.
Elevators aren't all that expensive in the grand scheme of things,
That's true.
$25,000 to $35,000 for a basic elevator. So, yeah. When you're building a house or doing a major renovation, you're doing a garage apartment. It's not that big percentage wise of a expense to put that elevator in. So something worth considering. Really dense areas like Southern California, for example, they call them ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Those are becoming really popular there. In fact, there's builders who do nothing but build ADUs in people's backyards, either for aging parents or for rental units for income. Yeah. Things like that.
My mom and I have this discussion all the time. They're very healthy. They're trying to decide what to do. And if they move away from Houston, she brought it up. She's like, well, let's just rebuild your garage into a garage apartment. She's like, I'll pay for that instead of buying a house. She's like, I'll just, we'll just rebuild it to be a condo that we can stay in. I'm like, what a thought. What an idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But if you're only going to be there for 14 years,
right.
Then
exactly.
You're like, but Mom, I'm not staying here.
Yeah. No, we're not doing it. But it was her idea. She's like, well, this is way cheaper than me trying to buy a house in Houston and figure out how to maintain it if we move away or we want to be in 2 places. So
mm-hmm. It's something that, over the last 20 years, like I saw a lot more of that with certain cultures that would be more common. Mm-hmm. Certain cultures, like to have extended families living on the same property. But now I've seen it becoming more common across the board.
Well, and I will say, I mean, if you're going to have children and work, I mean, the cost of care with all of that going up, we have lots of friends who will move their parents closer to their area, like help them, like, hey, let's get you a townhome. Let's, make sure that you're there so you can help. So that's part of it too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about all that I had, unless you have any other topics you'd like to bring up.
No, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Well, like I said, it was kind of a shorter one today. It's not like a super in-depth technical topic like I usually get into, but I thought it'd be fun to go a different direction.
Yeah, this was very fun.
And just to kind of summarize everything, I think that the story here is that whether it's a good real estate broker, real estate agent, or a good builder, we're going to have a good network of people to work with.
Yes.
And so, when you hire a good builder, he's going to know good architects and good interior designers and the right engineer for the job and the right network of vendors.
Yes.
And it's important, again, based on the price range that you're in, it's important to use somebody who's appropriate for that price range.
Absolutely.
So a guy, again, it always seems like I'm bashing the suburbs, but a guy who's building $200,000 houses in the suburbs has a whole different set of tradespeople that somebody who's building custom homes in town has. And
yes,
those guys are not the same guys to be working on your house if you're trying to go high end. So absolutely, it's working with the people who have that right trade base to execute the job properly.
Yes, and timing's a consideration, and these great professionals can help you with your making sure it's on the timeline that you want.
Yeah. And so one last thing, and this is something that we talked about in our very early episodes, and that's I love being involved as early as possible with people when they're trying to select a property. So I love working with realtors and clients early on, because if I can be involved in helping make suggestions or recommendations about whether or not to buy a specific property, it really helps the whole project. Because if they choose the wrong lot, or if they buy a house to remodel and they don't have that kind of that immediate feedback on, is this the right thing for you to do? What does this cost to accomplish? If they don't have that, they're going to have a harder time having a successful project.
Fully agree.
So definitely recommend people have their builder on board along with the realtor if they're going to build a new house or do a remodeling project or whatever. Like, assemble the whole team early.
Yes.
Like, have your if it's a design build like us, we can handle kind of all that. But if not, have your realtor, your architect, your builder all together to help you make the right decisions.
Sounds great. I fully agree.
All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot for being with me. Tell people how they can find Finch Property Group if they want to work with you here in Houston to buy or sell their house.
FinchProperties.com is the best place to go. And our team would love to serve and help you.
Awesome. Well, Danielle will link your website and put all your contact information on there so people can reach out to you if they're interested in working with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. And thank you all for joining us today on this episode of the Your Project Shepherd podcast. We'll see you next time. If you found us helpful and enjoyed listening, please support us by liking and subscribing here on your podcast platform, and also join us on our YouTube channel. We want to continue to bring you high-quality content and expert guests, and your support truly helps us to continue this journey. If you have any questions for me or my guests, or any feedback for us, you can email us at podcast@yourprojectshepherd.com. Thanks again.